The English civil wars began with a slow splintering of a kingdom. By 1642, the fault line between King Charles I and his parliament had reached its deepest point, over grievances related to religion, taxes, and the very nature of power. At their heart lay a contest for the soul of true religion. When the king raised his standard at Nottingham, triggering the civil war, he believed he was defending divine right. Parliament, led by men like Oliver Cromwell, believed they were defending ancient liberties. Neither side could have imagined the monster they were about to unleash. For 3 brutal years, the war consumed England, Scotland, and Ireland like a slow-burning fever. It was not a distant conflict of professional armies, but a civil war in the most literal sense, brother against brother, father against son. For a century since the Reformation, England had swung uneasily between Protestantism and Catholicism, never quite settling. When King Charles I and his Archbishop of Canterbury, William Laud, began to push a new, highly controversial prayer book in 1637, they lit a fuse that would burn through the entire kingdom.
At the outbreak of the English Civil War in 1642, the conflict was not just about king versus parliament, it was a firestorm of clashing religious ideologies, each side viewing the others as not merely wrong, but as agents of the devil. Catholics were the great shared enemy. Protestants of nearly all stripes feared that King Charles I, with his high church rituals, his Catholic queen, and his Archbishop Laud, was secretly steering England back to Rome. Protestants, mainly Anglicans, were themselves divided. The official Church of England under Laud emphasized ceremony, bishops, and the beauty of holiness. Many ordinary Protestants saw this as popery in disguise. But more moderate Protestants feared the Puritans and Calvinists as dangerous radicals. Calvinists believed in predestination, that God had already chosen the saved and the damned. Puritans were the most radical wing of English Calvinism. They wanted to purify the church of every last trace of Catholicism: no bishops, no prayer books, no stained glass, no popish vestments. Under the Protectorate between 1653 and 1659, when Oliver Cromwell ruled as Lord Protector, England was transformed into a nation of sober, God-fearing discipline. The Puritans, having won the civil wars, now sought to win the battle for the soul of daily life. They believed that idleness, frivolity, and excess were doorways to sin. What emerged was a profound and unmistakable grey shift in how England lived, dressed, and celebrated. Dress became plain and functional. To dress modestly was to honor God, to dress gaudily was to announce your vanity and, often, your royalist sympathies. Music was not banned, but its purpose changed. Tavern singing, bawdy ballads, coarse language, and complex polyphonic church music were driven out. In churches, organs were ripped out and choir stalls demolished. Only psalm singing remained. Dancing was widely condemned as vulgar and sexually suggestive, lacking moral restraint. Sundays became the most regulated day of all. No travel, no cooking beyond what was necessary, no idle walking, no alehouses. Entire families sat through hours of sermons and prayers. Officials known as Sabbath breaker hunters spied on neighbors. A woman could be fined for kissing her child on a Sunday.
The Bishops' Wars, 1639 to 1640, were two short but pivotal conflicts between King Charles I and the Scottish Covenanters. They began as a religious dispute over worship but quickly became a political crisis that helped trigger the English Civil Wars. The First Bishops' War was largely a bloodless affair that ended in stalemate. The Battle of Newburn 1640. After the truce collapsed, the Second Bishops' War ended in a decisive Covenanter victory and the king's humiliation. A Covenanter army of 20,000 veterans, experienced from the 30 Years' War, led by Alexander Leslie, invaded northern England. They routed a smaller English force at Newburn, just west of Newcastle upon Tyne. The Scots occupied the city and took control of England's coal supply, holding it hostage. The humiliated Charles was forced to sign the Treaty of Ripon, agreeing to pay the Scottish army's expenses while they remained in occupation. Battle of Dunbar. After the execution of Charles I, the Scots proclaimed his son, Charles II, as king. Cromwell invaded Scotland to crush this new royalist threat. Seeing that the Scots had descended from the hill to a more vulnerable position, Cromwell famously declared, "The Lord hath delivered them into our hand." At dawn, he launched a surprise attack against the Scottish right flank. In less than an hour, the Scots were shattered. Cromwell's cavalry routed them, and the infantry showed no mercy. The Battle of Worcester, fought on September 3, 1651, was the final, crushing defeat of the Royalist cause and the last major battle of the English Civil Wars. By this time, Charles II had been crowned by the Scots and invaded England with a mostly Scottish army, hoping to rally English royalists to his banner. Cromwell pursued him relentlessly. At Worcester, Charles made his stand with about 16,000 men, mostly inexperienced and exhausted. Cromwell attacked with nearly 30,000 veteran soldiers. The battle was a brutal, day-long slog through the streets of Worcester and across the River Severn. Cromwell personally led a decisive assault across a pontoon bridge, smashing into the Royalist flank. The fighting was house to house, with hundreds killed in the streets. By nightfall, the Royalist army had ceased to exist. Over 3,000 were killed and nearly 10,000 captured. Charles famously escaped, hiding in an oak tree and fleeing in disguise to France. When the Irish Rebellion of 1641 broke out, with reports, some true, many exaggerated, of thousands of Protestant settlers being massacred by Catholic rebels, the fury became apocalyptic. Anti-Catholic violence erupted like a long-suppressed fever. Lurid gossip went in overdrive. Accounts of pregnant women disemboweled and infants tossed on pikes. "No quarter for Papists" became a battle cry. Soldiers on both sides began to see their enemies not as fellow Englishmen, but as agents of Antichrist. Parliamentary troops at the siege of Drogheda in 1649, under Cromwell himself, slaughtered every Catholic they found, priests, monks, even women who had sought sanctuary in a church. It was not merely war, it was a crusade. Puritan soldiers smashed stained glass and beheaded saint statues, calling it the cleansing of idols. In England, the battles were butcheries. At Edgehill in 1642, the two sides stumbled into a savage stalemate, leaving 1,000 men dead in a single afternoon, their bodies left to bloat under a cold sky. For the Parliamentarians, to defeat the king was to purge England of the whore of Babylon. For the Royalists, defending the king was defending the ancient, sacramental faith of their fathers. At Marston Moor in 1644, the largest battle of the wars, the rain turned the fields into a swamp of blood and mud. Cromwell's Ironsides, men who believed they were God's executioners, charged again and again, their swords notching and breaking on skulls. The Royalist Prince Rupert, once invincible, watched his white-plumed cavalry shatter and flee. After the battle, the wounded lay in the ditches for days, crying for water that never came. There were two battles at Newbury, Berkshire. The first battle in 1643 had Royalist forces under King Charles I in person, accompanied by Prince Rupert made up of 14,000 men, faced an equal number of Roundhead army. The battle was fought throughout the day, eventually becoming a grueling stalemate. Approximately 1,300 Royalists and 1,200 Parliamentarians killed. The Second Battle of Newbury in 1644 featured a Parliamentarian army led by 3 generals with a combined force of 19,000 men against the Royalist army led by King Charles, numbering 8,500 men. Despite being outnumbered, the king scored an outright success and withdrew to Oxford. By 1645, the king's cause was broken. At Naseby, Cromwell's new model army, disciplined, fanatical, and well-fed, annihilated the last Royalist field army. The king surrendered to the Scots, who sold him to Parliament. For nearly 2 years, Charles played a chess game of negotiation and deceit, believing that God would never allow an anointed monarch to die by the hand of his subjects. He was wrong. The army, radicalized by years of blood and preaching, had had enough. Parliament was purged of Royalist supporters, leaving a rump parliament of 50 men, all that remained of England's legislature. Charles refused to recognize the authority of the appointed court. He sat in Westminster Hall, calm and dignified, while the prosecutor, John Cook, argued that the king had betrayed his trust and become a murderer. On the morning of January 30, 1649, Whitehall Palace on a freezing and grey day. The king walked across St. James's Park to the banqueting house, wearing 2 shirts so he would not shiver and be mistaken for a coward. He spoke a few words to William Juxon, Bishop of London, "I go from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown." Then he laid his head on the block. The wars ended not with a peace, but with an execution. England was now a republic, a commonwealth without an anointed king. The Civil War had not solved a single grievance. In the end, the question of which was the true religion was never settled on the battlefield. But the bloodshed over prayer books, vestments, and the direction of an altar rail proved that theology could kill as surely as any musket ball. The execution of Charles I was not just a political act, it was a verdict against a king who had tried to force a single, narrow vision of holiness upon a people who would rather die than kneel.